Welcome to our show, Jenny. It's a pleasure to meet you and have you here joining me for this chat. So let's start by getting to know you a little better. Where were you born and where did you grow up?
Yep. Thanks for having me. I'm Jenny. Yeah, I was born in the US in a small town called Greenville, South Carolina. Very much where I grew up in having a suburban American experience, like the kind you see ragged on Twitter and that kind of thing. So that was a lot of what my upbringing was.
Sounds idyllic. And your career, according to LinkedIn, has some very topical keywords sprinkled throughout it, like product design, UX, AI, human-computer interaction, and research. All things we don't really typically associate with sustainable fashion. So perhaps you could walk us through your career journey so far.
Yeah, that is super true, super good. I'm happy to go through that. So my background is in design. I studied product design in my undergrad at Carnegie Mellon University, and worked here and there in internships in the big tech space, and eventually then made my way across the pond to here in London, where I'm based now, to study my dual masters in innovation design engineering over at the Royal College of Art and Imperial College London. So that was a big mouthful. But basically, yeah, if you look at my background, you'll see it's not really in the fashion space as much as it is in the tech space. A lot of where my work was before, and I think where my work still is today, is looking at how design can serve societal needs and integrate itself into technological solutions to offer more value to people, users, consumers, in different types of spaces. So some of the solutions that I worked on were things like AI privacy principles over at Microsoft AI and Research Group, as well as some design work for Jet.com, which is now part of Walmart's e-commerce group. So a lot of different sort of avenues and industries, but a lot of the baseline is really like, how can we use tech through design lens to build something impactful and valuable?
Very cool. And you say things like the College of the Arts. So have you got quite an interest in sort of the arty side of it as well as the technical side? Because that's quite an interesting combo.
Yeah, I think my background in design is often associated with the arts. I think where I started was very much in the visual arts as a kid who just liked to draw and paint. And that was like my first idea of what arts could be. And it turned into this career of looking at design first from a concrete level of like the skills, being really into graphic design, and then eventually into a space of design in conjunction with tech and looking at design as sort of a systematic approach to different types of problem solving environments. So that's like a bit of how it evolved. I think the art side grows with the sort of design industry and design practice into something that I'm now doing now, which is a bit of human computer interaction design, and of course running like a business and all of the things and joys that comes with that.
How do you feel about AI driven art?
Oh, really good question. I know it's super controversial. AI driven art is like going to grow dramatically. I think there are so many people making solutions for all sorts of creative purposes. I think the creative industry will benefit greatly from being able to like iterate fast their designs, their ideas. But I think there also definitely needs to be legislation that protects artists, protects their styles, protects their approaches and craft. So I hope that there will be a nice balance of sort of legislation and sort of tech pushing forward how we can use AI to make creative things.
I guess it's the same with any industry, right? It's like we need that progress,
Yeah.
but also like with the right protections in place, it can't be unchecked. Um,
Yeah.
so so you've got this, you've amassed this incredible set of skills from all these amazing places. So what ultimately led you to decide to apply these skills that you learned at the likes of Microsoft and Google and so on to the fashion industry specifically?
Yeah. So Shade was really born from a mixture of my co-founder and I's desire to build technology that can shift consumer behavior in impactful ways. We had a like blend of interests when we came together, and that really melded perfectly into, from backgrounds of environmental science to sustainable design, for myself, human computer interaction and product design. And, except as well as exceptionally different personal experiences with fashion itself. A lot of us were sort of fashionistas with our different types of ideas of what fashion is. And so when we came together, it was really like a um, nice evolution of our interests as friends. For me personally, I fell in love with the sustainable fashion world when learning about the fashion industry and the impact it could have for the environment and for climate. It wasn't until I started this project that I learned that, it's the second most polluting industry after gas and oil. And that really says something about like the scale of how this industry acts, even if you think, oh, I'm just getting one dress. Like what really does that mean? So when I looked at my skills and saw how much design can fuse together with the ways we use technology to educate ourselves and change our behavior, it's like an opportunity I wanted to take, especially with the right team. And that's how we ended up applying it to this industry in this particular way.
It's a perfect segue into talking about Shade. Let's talk about it. So tell us more about it. So maybe you've told us a little bit about how you've worked together with your two co-founders, but maybe you can elaborate a bit more on that process of how you decided this would be it and how you went about that beginning journey.
Yeah, so me and my co-founders, we love fashion. We want sustainable fashion, but we kind of recognize that there's only a few ways to find it. Things like word of mouth through friends, friends recommending, oh, I saw this really cool brand. It has this approach. It's something I really vibe with. Maybe you'll like it too. Or just Googling things and reading blogs. These are basically the only solutions that we saw out there. And to us, it wasn't a scalable or accessible option. One of my co-founders, the good story is that, she had some dedicated magazines that she always looked at and read and kept up with in terms of sustainable consumer goods. So she was kind of the go-to of being like, hey, what brand should I go if I want to buy this new winter coat, or if I want to get a different type of soap or whatever, stuff like this. But it wasn't scalable. It was sort of like, I have to message this one person and I'm hoping that she knows the answer. And so we wanted to make something that for us and our friends to access basically whenever they wanted to find sustainable fashion online, whenever they wanted to find this kind of stuff. So that's a little bit of where the ethos was born out of. And then we're just a group of friends building a project together. It started in uni, and then quickly after uni, that was when we sort of gained the traction and the confidence to push it forward as a company.
Very cool. So it currently works via a Chrome extension, which integrates visual search into a sustainable brand's customer journey. So how does that look for a typical online shopper?
Yeah, so this is a great question. We totally recognize that becoming a sustainable fashion consumer is a journey and not a single destination. So for some people, that solution is to stop consuming completely. And for others, it's learning to shop more intentionally as they encounter brands in the wild. So this is like a zoomed out point, right? But Shade is a solution for consumers more in that latter, for people who want to take that first step to shop intentionally. And because they've become aware of their impact inside of the fashion industry, but they have difficulty figuring out what actions can I take? What are the first steps that I can do? That isn't just Googling and becoming completely overwhelmed about, you should just stop completely when I actually need to buy maybe like a sports bra or something. So, there's all of these sort of trade-offs that we make when we are sort of balancing this. And so Shade really is a solution for those people who want to take that first step and shop intentionally. The current challenge is really that we focus on is for consumers when they shop normally, that it takes too much time and effort to be diligent, to learn, to figure out what to buy. So we want to help people basically overcome that to find clothing that not just fits their needs stylistically, but also is sustainable and fits the sort of expectations they have for the clothes that they want to buy moving forward.
Super cool. And so say you're somebody who needs to buy something new. You're really conscious about your impact and you want to do it the right way. You decide to use Shade. What happens next? You go to your typical go-to brand, say, and then what happens?
Yeah, so if you downloaded Shade, the extension, what it'll do is it'll work in the background as you normally shop online. So while you browse, say you're on like Selfridges or a website like this, ASOS, little stickers will pop up on top of the products to let you know how sustainable that brand is. And then the fun part for us is that you can then use a visual search feature that we've created to find sustainable lookalikes to any product that you encounter online. So this is the feature that really helps make sustainable fashion accessible through our product. And so, yeah, the example would be like you're on Selfridges, you see this dress that you really like, but it's from a brand that ends up having really poor labor practices. You can use Shade then to find similar Black dresses that have a similar style and similar look that are from well-rated brands and sustainable brands.
Very cool. I actually just got you to explain it when I could have explained it too, because I tried it out and it was very cool. So this is my experience of it. I went to the H&M website. I selected a yellow caftan. I wasn't paying enough attention to the little stickers though. So next time I'll try that because that's really cool. But all I did was I found a caftan that I really liked, a yellow one, like a very bright one. And I was like, there's no way that your extension will come up with something this unique. So I clicked the button. I was being skeptic. So I clicked the button and the Shade extension pops up on the side. And there's like a little wand and you click on the caftan and on the side pops up all of these designs that were actually extremely similar.
Nice.
But not similar in the sense that they were like knockoffs, but like if you're going for a yellow caftan, there was plenty of yellow caftans from really sustainable brands. So, and they were priced from like £25 all the way through to like £1,000. So there was like a really wide range to suit different price points. So I found it actually extremely impressive. So there were brands on there. I'm just remembering like there was Pippa Holt. That was the one that I quite liked. And they were rated good by Good On You. So that came in, that sort of must have fed in somehow, which is very cool.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask on behalf of the folks out there who are more tech-minded than me, and you can obviously tell by how long it took me to set up the podcast that I'm not that tech-minded. So perhaps you could share a little bit more for those folks how the technology works. For example, like how does AI come into it? And do you need some sort of API to connect to Good On You's database? How does it all work?
Yeah, those are really great questions. I'm so glad that worked for you. Sorry, I'll make one point about that journey, which is, I think a lot of people assume sustainable fashion is a very specific aesthetic. It's like beige, it's naturals, it's neutrals, it's expensive. But that's just not true. There are so many sustainable brands, designers who want to make sustainable clothing and are approaching that with their own creative direction and creative sense. And I think one of the things about Shade that we really want to push forward is we want to break that misconception about what sustainable fashion looks like. It's not a singular thing. It's not a singular aesthetic. And so that's one of the things that we love about that feature that we made, which is being able to find similar things and that you're not limited to being, looking a certain way, having a certain style just because you want to be sustainable. But onto your question about the technology, the ethos behind Shade is that a lot of the information already exists out there, and we are just trying to bridge that gap for consumers to find the information they need to make informed decisions and also find the products that they want to actually have. So the tech streamlines the data straight to the user, so they don't have to work to learn about those brands. This is through an API. We currently are working with Good On You's API, and then we're also expanding to other publicly available information and data. So that's stuff like the Fashion Transparency Index is a really popular one. Remake is also really popular. There are also more ratings down the supply chain level around organic cotton and these kinds of things. So we're wanting to expand into all of that. And then we also use AI then to do the visual matching. So that's like looking at the image that you see when you use the wand tool and then seeing, the specifics of the product that is on that image and finding similar products that are also within the database of sustainable brands that we have. So all of this happens in the back when users are shopping. So they don't have to worry about any of that. And it works in tandem when they're going and shopping online on H&M, like you said, or on whatever other marketplaces that they're looking at. It also works on Twitter. So like, it doesn't have to be that when you're shopping, it could be that you saw, your favorite K-pop star or whoever has a really cool new outfit that you want to find something similar to, you can also use that feature for that.
Oh, wow. That's really cool. I didn't realize it did that. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's one of my like secret favorite ways to use it. Like sometimes you'll see like, oh, Taylor Swift had this really good outfit, and I kind of want to like find something similar to that if possible. It's like one of the only use cases that I'm like, oh, so good. I love it. Love it.
That's awesome. I love that. Especially if you find something that's like, how sometimes you come across people who have like a really unique style, and it's quite difficult to emulate or to copy, frankly.
Yeah.
So yeah, that would be really handy. Very cool.
Yeah. I think this is really like the future of where fashion will go as well. It's not, we'll take a bit of the labor outside of people, like so that people don't have to do the digging for that one piece and keeping in mind that style that they had on Pinterest that they saw a month ago, to then like being, online and being like, oh, that's the same style, that's the same version. I think tools like this are what are made to help alleviate some of those burdens for people.
Yeah, because it is such it's like a research project today if you want to buy anything with impact in mind, right? Like it's like it takes days.
Exactly.
I'm building a house at the moment, and it's like just to find lights, just to find 3 lights to go above the kitchen bench is like hours of my life. It's like a whole week that I'm spending, just looking for stupid lights that fit the bill from a sustainability perspective, and it's frustrating. So very cool.
Yeah.
So I think this is obvious from our conversation so far, but maybe just to articulate it for listeners out there. So Shade is driven by this desire to challenge fast fashion and promote sustainability. So can you share a little bit more about that mission, sort of the overarching mission and the values sort of underpinning Shade?
Yeah, for sure. So fundamentally, we believe that shopping intentionally with values in mind is how we, as consumers, can really lead the industry to improve and change for the better. That's not to say we don't believe in legislation and these types of things. We absolutely do. And we're believers that, we have to approach this industry and these problems from all sorts of angles, including legislation and including consumer behavior. So especially with Shade's approach, it's about empowering consumers in a way that lets companies know that this is the standard for brands. This is the standard that we're expecting from now on. And that sustainability is not just a nice to have. It's something that we want to be, base practice for the industry. And that is sort of the ethos that is against fast fashion, that has set the opposite standard and is pushing the industry in the opposite direction. So we want this to be a tool for people who have similar beliefs that what they do and what they buy has an impact in the industry itself, and that this technology is a vector that can make that happen. So we want to change the industry, and our vision to do it is in fashion, making it easy to shop sustainable wherever you are online.
Very cool. So now it's obviously it's pegged to do great things. Shade is pegged to do great things. It's still in beta. And already so many awards from the likes of Fast Company and Vogue. And I was curious, have you received much feedback from the broader public on the extension's efficacy and practical usefulness?
Yes. So the awards, especially early on with Shade, is what really gave us the feedback and the confidence to move it into a full-time venture for us. At the beginning, with those awards, we were so privileged to get. We saw so much feedback from the general public that it was something that people wanted. We had a wait list set up. People could sign up and say, yes, like this is so awesome. I want to hear more about it whenever you launch, whenever that is. And I'll download it and use it. And so this was like the extra push we needed to go forward. More recently, we also had some feedback and award from the Women in Clean Tech and Sustainability pitch competition, where our CEO got People's Choice Award. And this type of thing was more in the realm of venture capital, but also gave us a lot of validation and feedback for how to also move it forward. Practically speaking, the beta is out, and we work with users basically hand in hand to iterate and take feedback in to figure out what are the next features, what are the next things that need to be made more efficient, to made more effective. Whether that's like the recommendations not working good enough, wanting to have a more direct way to find certain types of products, All of these types of features are things that we heard directly from users and bring it in. So we're definitely taking that iterative approach when it comes to taking feedback and being agile and learning sort of hand in hand with all of our stakeholders. That includes brands and consumers.
And I realize that it's still early days and still in beta, but my initial thought was, do you plan to extend the extension perhaps into other product categories or into other browsers? Because obviously the use cases are broad.
Yeah, for sure. I think that was one of the first thoughts we had when we burst the idea. We're like, and we can go into beauty, we can go into here. But for now, yeah, like you said, it's early. We're sticking pretty close to the fashion industry. But it's definitely not unknown to us that things like the beauty industry are facing similar types of issues, problems, and like a similar type of revolution from what consumers are demanding from those companies. So it will be interesting to sort of see where that goes in the future, especially with Shade. For browsers, for sure as well, we want to make it into something that's accessible for all types of consumers, no matter what browser you use. So we'll for sure also expand to that and make it easy for people to have a direct way to find sustainable fashion.
Yeah, I imagine on the product category side, it's very limited to data sources, and having really robust inputs. Because the certification industry out there is certainly not perfect, and getting the right inputs and the right research to make sure that it's robust and accurate is, I imagine, one of your big challenges for expansion.
Yeah, it's so true. The supply chain for the beauty industry, the fashion industry, it's really fragmented. I mean, even these big companies don't necessarily know what's happening all the way down at the bottom of their supply chain. So that's something that is a big challenge that there are so many credible sources doing. So something we've seen in the process of making Shade is actually there are so many certification companies that are working to make that happen from a third party unbiased perspective. Good on You is one of them. I mean, there's nonprofits that are also doing this, as well as legislation government-based organizations who are doing this and publicizing all of that information. So yeah, we think the data does exist out there. It's a complicated, deep place to go, but also, consumers need to find that data really easily. And that's something that we also hinge Shade on.
And something we don't get to talk a ton about is female-founded tech companies and sustainability. So this is exciting for so many reasons, and a perfect example of how diverse thinking is better for solving important problems. And so I'm curious to get your perspective on this. Perhaps you could share some of your thoughts on your collective founders journey so far from the female perspective, and you can take that. You can take that in any direction you'd like. But what I had in the back of my mind was thinking along the lines of challenges you may have faced, or perhaps ways in which you've been able to bring a unique perspective to this problem.
Mm-hmm. There's so many stories we could go down with this one.
I imagine it's a bit of a rabbit hole.
Yeah, it's for sure. You could do a whole podcast series, just about this one sort of siloed experience of, different types of founders in this industry. Is for sure a struggle. I think being a woman of color, being a young woman of color in a tech company, doing a fashion company inside a venture capital sort of framework, it's a lot of challenges that come with different biases from the people that are sitting at the table with you to, the entrenched issues that happen from it just being a very male-dominated landscape. When the people who are sitting at that table aren't the consumers that you're targeting and aren't people who relate to the problem, it's really on you to sort of tell that story convincingly and to say these are real issues that real people go through, especially for example, if it's someone who's not gone shopping in the last 10 years, whose spouse has been doing it for them, who has had a single style for the last 20 years, not really considering sustainable shopping, not really part of the discourse. To this, it feels like an alien world to discuss. It's not necessarily, you have to bring all of that data. You have to bring all of the use cases. You have to bring the conversations that you've been having with people in this space to the table to say, these are real tangible issues. It's a real opportunity and also a real place to make impact that we can do together. So, that's, I think, one of the the sort of high level big issues that come with the space. And I think in terms of fashion, I think having women of color, having these different diversity approaches really help define what the fashion industry is currently and where you want it to go and where you see it going. It's really cool to see other brands echoing that belief. I think one of the thoughts, personal experiences that came to mind was like, maybe a year ago, I was at a size that didn't really work with secondhand fashion. So I kind of thought, oh, woe's me. Like, I'm never going to have secondhand fashion because nothing ever fits me. I can only buy retail. But, that's not true. After starting Shade, I saw there's so many brands who also have a similar ethos, who have models who have a similar body type to me, who have a similar style to me, that I can see myself reflected and go, whoa, this is something I can actually get behind. This is something I can do. I don't have to just throw my hands in the air, go to Target, go to, these high, big, fast fashion retailers and just accept that this is the only place that I can be seen or be heard. So it's an interesting space to approach from all of these different angles of like the fashion industry, the VC world. But they're all challenges as much as they are like opportunities to help define where this space goes, We're also lucky to be supported by some amazing programs out there. So it's not just like, oh, it's hard to be heard, but also there are programs and people who want these voices to be heard. So we've been in places like the Undaunted, which was formerly known as the Greenhouse, as well as We Innovate with the Imperial College London, which are programs that make a point to support women. And so we've met a lot of other really cool founders as well in this space who have a similar sort of desire to support each other. So it's also a really great network and on the other side of things, But that was a bit of a ramble on where it goes and some of those experiences. Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine, especially in the venture landscape. It's like just getting so many things over the line, and especially I would imagine just the conversation around sustainability is not straightforward, like why even do it? Like trying to convince venture capitalists that sustainability is an important thing, or maybe it's not so bad in venture capital. It's certainly bad in private equity, I think. But
yeah,
it's encouraging to hear that there are more and more folks out there willing to help. In fact, our very first podcast was with a female founder from Imperial College, which is amazing.
That's awesome.
Yeah, very different topic, but I can't even remember the topic. Well, I mean, I can if I really think about it, but it was very technical and she was this incredible genius. It was very, very, very interesting. So that's it's encouraging to hear, but yeah, not surprising that you faced a few hurdles along the way. Now I wanted to talk to you a little bit about your perspectives on the role of business in all of this and why we often ask this question on the podcast, but why take sort of a business model for something that's got a social lens to it? So the About section on the Shade website talks about sustainability being good for people and the planet and profits. And so you're obviously preaching to the choir with me here, but perhaps you could elaborate for those that aren't super familiar with that concept or why that could be a really great way to run a business, why you chose that approach.
Yeah. I totally, yes, something I would love to talk about. Sustainability for us is a virtue that all industries should strive towards. We think Shade can be supportive of this movement, especially, in the fashion industry, which is the one we're focused on today. It's an interesting balance because people will not stop wanting fashion. It's not like the entire population just goes, done, But we also believe that people will continue to accelerate towards more responsible choices. And we see that as becoming more and more non-negotiable as a responsibility for each of us individually to have and each of us to hold, other companies, other people, other governments also accountable for. So whether it's like the things that we buy or the habits we have, by being a business, we think we're able to accelerate even faster towards building positive impact than necessarily we could as individuals. There's avenues that are more accessible to us because we've created this business, being able to sort of funnel larger amounts of capital towards the goals that we have as a company. that's something that's much more difficult to do as a single individual without like a company entity under it or this kind of thing. So yeah, to us, like if any company wants to succeed, us or otherwise, they need to become sustainable. And this will ultimately, yeah, be a non-negotiable as legislation really intersects with it in like the most recent years and also going into the next few years. So consumer demand, consumer behavior, all of that like sort of flows into this ethos that we have.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. It's going to become table stakes, I think.
Sure.
So your site also talks about a bit about impact. And so I wanted to ask you, what impact do you hope to achieve, and how are you thinking about measuring success from an impact perspective, with the context being that I know that impact is super tricky to measure?
Yeah, impact is especially tricky to measure when it comes to fashion and the sort of different types of consumer behavior that is our focus as a company. So, fashion, as you know, involves such a complicated supply chain with like design, materials development, labor, agriculture, all of that. So impact can have so many different levels when it comes to what does it mean to buy, this thing versus another, when it comes to all of the different stakeholders involved to get that one product into your hands. Our hope is that as consumers pay more attention to these points through tools like ours, they're able to shift their behavior at scale towards more sustainable choices, supporting those companies who are looking at, ethical labor and organic materials and these types of things over others. Again, we like wholeheartedly believe that individuals and individual choices have that impact. And by supporting companies doing the right thing, we're signaling to the greater industry at large that this is the standard that we are expecting from now on. That said, essentially, the short answer to your question is we see our impact in shifting purchases from fast fashion one purchase at a time, and that all of these sort of dilute down into the correct labor practices, the use of the right materials, the use of all of these other factors that are involved to produce those types of products. This is, of course, more qualitative than the quantitative methods that are often used in VC world, like carbon prevented or water saved. But we still believe ultimately that this is true impact that's happening that has a trickle down effect to all of the other stakeholders inside of the industry.
Yeah, I think, from a consumer perspective, having all of that decision making completely taken out with a very trustworthy option for researching I think it's huge, because that's how we all used to shop, right? Like not that long ago. Like I remember when I used to love shopping and going to the mall and like just going crazy and going on like a binge and buying tons of cheap stuff. And the assumption was that no one was getting hurt or injured or damaged, or that the environment was getting completely messed up from my decisions. It was just for fun. And so I think to move to a place where consumers don't have to think about that as much, because they trust that the mechanisms are in place to protect them from making poor decisions, I think it's a really great thing.
Yeah, I definitely relate.
We're on the same page. Now we talked a little bit about challenges from the female perspective, but I wanted to think about it from the founder perspective as well, because I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there who would love to hear about any other significant challenges that the three of you face and how you've overcome them.
Yeah, this is an interesting question. I think is not quite just a generalizable point to building a startup on its own. There are so many challenges there around, just getting into it, talking to your consumers. Don't like get stuck in the high level research, the high level data, but to actually get real points that come across from your consumers, your users, your stakeholders, in order to find that real value driven point that you can build as a product, as a service. So that was like the first thought I had in mind in terms of just the general startup experience and the general sort of startup venture world. On the other hand, maybe more specific for us, the challenge that also came to mind was like affordability in the sustainable fashion space. And that this is actually a very specific challenge that we our company is facing. Because that one of the biggest misconceptions inside sustainable fashion is that it's incredibly expensive. But there are so many ways to approach this problem. And the first one really is like education, right? The reality is fast fashion is, like I said, the one who set that standard for what clothing should cost, but it's not something that we should accept. These prices are prices often made possible through the harm of others, the exploitation of laborers, and shortcuts that get taken inside the supply chain. And the more that people see that tangible connection between the purchases they're making and the sort of signaling that they're creating inside of the industry, the more we can sort of change our habits to be more responsible. I think the second is also identifying the fact that it's not true that sustainable fashion is just incredibly expensive. Like you said, when you use Shade, you could see like the range of the caftans and products was like from 25 all the way to 1,000. For sure, there are expensive designer clothings that you can get, but there are also affordable and sustainable brands. I think some of my favorites are things, this one brand called like Yes Friends, who make a point to do a very affordable, sustainable clothing, and also like secondhand vintage options that do like upscaled, upworked work. I think a great London-based one is like Glass Onion. These companies are doing the work to make sustainable fashion affordable, and they're doing it at a scale that, yeah, you can buy it, and it's super easy. And this is an easy alternative to the same $15 price point at H&M, but it has so much better implications. So it's an interesting challenge, like this particular one that came to mind, because affordability is here and it's something that is on people's mind, especially in this sort of economic environment that we're in today. But inside of the community, we see at large that there's all of this sentiment that we can work with. The data shows that people are willing to pay more for sustainable fashion, and that if given the option, they would choose something sustainable over the other. So it's an opportunity that we think, why not make a tool that people can use to figure it out? So yeah, there's a lot of hope for us inside of this particular one too.
And I imagine from your very personal experience being a interested in design and UX and so on, it must have been quite fun, like challenging but fun at the same time to get the whole flow right and to get the magic wand working just so, right, and to make it so smooth that you don't really think about it too much as a user. There's not like, okay, now what do I do? It's like, oh yeah, it's sort of like a natural feel, which obviously a lot, to make it look so simple probably meant a lot of work. So did you find that process very energizing, or was it like frustrating? How did you go about that?
It's definitely both, depending on the day. Yeah, like the experience with Shade, when we first made it, was wanting to, especially with my personal background, wanting to take tech and apply it in interesting, innovative ways that really can shift consumer behavior. We saw that there are marketplaces that exist for sustainable goods, these types of things, but the discovery channel for them relies heavily on sustainable fashion consumers' word of mouth, right? So there are sort of different blockers for different ways that people shop today that we wanted to sort of iterate on, with Shade being an extension. Maybe it's a bit unique compared to a marketplace in the sort of application of it. But on the other hand, it works across your shopping experiences. So when someone's not thinking about their sustainable values, but they already have done the work to download the extension, it's working for you, so you don't have to think too much about it. And this was one of the big factors for us in terms of the user experience was, you say you want to be sustainable, but when it comes down to it, I'm in a rush to buy a dress for this wedding I have to attend next month. I don't think about it anymore. So this is one of those things where we want to insert ourselves into the user experience so that it's really more mindless and you don't have to work to figure it out, basically. So I think that's really, I hope that answers your question, one of the places where we really apply the sort of design, UX, and product thinking into where, the current form and shape of Shade.
Yeah, and that human behavior, that natural say-do gap, because it's actually quite difficult to do. even though you say you would like to. The doing part is tricky, so making that part easiest is clearly where there's an amazing opportunity. So very cool. So looking ahead, what's next for you guys? Where are you going with the rest of 2023 and 2024?
So now that the beta is out, we are focused on customers and sales. Very business business point. We are like trying
stuff.
to branch out, our brand affiliates, our relationships, finding strategic partners, understanding our customer needs, and really building, like I said, iteratively with our product to find the right solution, find the right, most accessible points for consumers and individuals to find sustainable fashion. So that's like top number one goal for sure, is to continue with the product and continue expanding our reach to users, to brands, to consumers, so that the fashion and sustainable fashion community can see us and try it out and iterate to make the value prop even stronger. We want to grow, so that's really important to us. And I think part of noting earlier that the market is really fragmented is something that we want to see happen with Shade, is can we connect all of these different types of stakeholders inside the supply chain, the consumers, the brands, and see what we can do to make a greater impact, whether that's creating a community for brands on top of the product, so on and so forth. So yeah, all of that. We're fundraising our pre-seed round.
Just a small amount of things. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you can see my calendar. It's like totally crazy.
So sorry, I interrupted you there. You were saying, so you're also going to be building on the fundraising path as well.
Yeah. So we are a startup. We're doing our pre-seed round right now. And so this is also one of those big other things that are moving forward as much as we are working in the product side. So it's going in parallel in order to, build even more momentum for where we want to go.
Yeah, awesome. And I imagine that puts on a tiny bit of pressure, though, to build up the monetization and to prove out the sustainable business model aspect.
Yeah, absolutely. And it'll be interesting because I know it kind of relates to an earlier question, but not all investors are just there to focus on returns, right? There are so many also angel investors and people out there who want to support mission-driven companies like ours and like others in the sustainable world. So it's actually really incredible to connect with them and sort of feel that synergy between us.
That's so feel good and so lovely to hear.
Yeah,
I'm so
hope.
happy.
Yeah.
It's not all just money hungry folks out there. There's people wanting to do good with their money,
for sure,
which is amazing. Now we ask one question on every single podcast episode, which is, if you could deliver one message or piece of advice to the entire world, so every person on the planet basically, and you'd be sure that it would be truly heard, you only get one message, what would it be?
This is like by far the hardest question of all of your questions.
Just a small amount of pressure. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought about it, and I thought of all sorts of like hardcore, soft stuff. And I was like, you know what? Like the one that I really landed on was like, good vibes, good people, and thoughtful action will take you anywhere you want to go. Keeping like a realistic but optimistic attitude and surrounding yourself with the right people will, ultimately be the formula that takes you to adapt to any challenges that you have to deal with, no matter what it is. Yeah.
I love that. That's a great one. That's one for the record books. That really resonates. And lastly, of course, I think it's obvious, but how can listeners out there best support you guys? What can they do to make sure that Shade is a success?
Yeah, you can download Shade. This is definitely the number one. Give us feedback if anything resonated in this chat or in your experience with the extension. Like, definitely feel free to message us, send an email, any of that. We're also on socials. We're on the Chrome store. It's the URL you can get to easily with SHADYCLUB.com/download. So all of that, spreading the word, that would be a tremendous help for us. I'm plugging now, but if you're a brand, please get in contact with us at hello@shadyclub.com, because we would love to talk to more brands and learn how we can support them too. Yeah, I think
And
that's
let's just
all of
reiterate the online persona is SHADYCLUB, not Shade. Just for people listening, it's SHADYCLUB. I'll put the links in the show notes just so that it's super easy for folks to find it. But I imagine that was a challenge from getting the right domain perspective. But SHADYCLUB's very cool.
Yes. Yeah, thank you. We like to think of the sort of company and community, especially in the future, as Shady Club, and our product, Shade.
Nice. Oh, yeah, I see what you're doing there. Very cool.
Thank you.
And the handles for the socials, because that's obviously a super easy way for people to find you. Is it SHADYCLUB as well, at SHADYCLUB?
Yes, I think on Instagram it's shady.club, but hopefully there'll be URLs in the description wherever it is. But yeah, that's us on Instagram, on TikTok, and LinkedIn.
Lovely. So, Jenny, that's a wrap. Thank you so much for joining us today. So on board with your mission and super excited to watch you take down the fashion industry, the fast fashion industry. Take down the fast fashion industry and build up the sustainable fashion industry.
Let's do it.
Thanks so much, Jenny.